Hello block printers, thank you for joining me for another printing tip video. I'm Tess from the Arty Crafty Place and I'm here to share with you my tips and tricks to help with your block printing at home. So in this video, I'm going to be looking at pressure when printing. So we're going to be looking at when you're applying too much pressure or too little pressure and how to know how much pressure to apply to your printing blocks so you get the best print possible. We're also going to be looking at the difference between simple printing blocks and very detailed printing blocks. So the differences between the designs and how they can differ from each other. So hopefully you'll find this video very helpful and let's get started. So in this video, we're just going to be looking in more detail at our printing and the results we get, and also how the kind of pressure we apply and how the different designs vary from each other. So this is just really going to give you more information so that you can make sure you're getting the best prints possible when you're block printing at home. So first of all, we're going to start with our meadow block. So this is one of our large designs, I would say. I kind of work with three different size blocks in my head. So we've got large designs, we've got kind of medium size block, and then we've got small printing blocks. So to make it easy for you, when I'm printing with a large block, I tend to use two hands. So this would be kind of one of our meadows, our large B, a tile printing block, just one where you kind of need to use two hands to apply the right pressure. So when I'm printing with this, what I tend to do is use both my hands, the palm of both my hands, and I put it on either side of the block and I just give it a nice wiggle. So I just rock it kind of side to side, up and down. A wiggle is my very technical term for just giving your block a little bit of movement. And this is why your foam mat is so important, because by having that soft surface underneath me, I'm ensuring that I'm getting really good contact between my block and my fabric. So I'm gonna get a very good print. But you just move it side to side just so you can feel all the edges. And a larger block needs a bit more of a wiggle than, say, a tiny block or a small block. So just make sure you get the right amount of pressure on there and then up. So there we go, I have a beautiful print. So it's come out really clear, all the edges are really sharp. I've got a lovely colour. So this is the perfect print. I've clearly got exactly the right amount of pressure on that block. But let's look at when you apply too much pressure so that you can see the difference and you can see if you're going wrong anywhere at home. So I'm applying the same amount of paint to my block, just lightly tapping all over. And then with this print, I'm gonna press too hard. So I'm gonna be indenting it into the mat. So I can feel that it's really squidging into the mat, which is definitely me pushing too hard. And let's see how this looks. So if you can see on this block, it might be a little bit darker than this one, but actually it's very smudgy. Some of the edge of my printing block has come out in the design, and also the edges are just smudged and not as crisp and clear as my first print. So you can see here, I've definitely applied too much paint because you just lose the really sharp and beautiful detail that when you apply the right amount of pressure. So this one, it's all smudgy and things. So I know I've gone too hard there. So really make sure you're practicing with it and making sure that you're applying the right pressure. So if it is coming out a bit smudgy and not very clear, next time try printing with less pressure, not indenting it into the mat, but just giving it a nice wiggle all over the block, and you should get a better print. So that was our large block. So again, I always advise two hands with something like that and just getting nice pressure all over the block. Next up, let's look at a medium-sized block. So I would say my hair, this is a nice medium-sized block. And with a medium-sized block, I tend to use one hand, just the palm of one of my hands, and then I get a good contact between the block all over. So let's have a go at printing this. I'm going to do the hair in pink. So just getting a nice coverage of paint, like I always do, just tapping lightly all over. And then we're going to turn the block upside down, and I use a flat hand and just side to side, up and down. Remember, you're not indenting it into the mat, you're just giving it a nice wiggle so that you can feel it move. And that's just going to ensure you get the good contact. So there we go, really lovely. See how nice he came out? And then again, let's look at applying too much pressure. So this time I'm indenting him into the mat and pushing far too hard, and I can really feel it wiggling. And again, it might be hard to see on the camera, but he's just not coming out as sharp. So it's really important to get the right amount of pressure. Let's try with not enough pressure and see if we get anything there. So that is just a very light push. So the prints still come out very well, but actually it's not as dark, and there's patches in the print that have really hardly printed. So you can see there that just getting the right amount of pressure on there and just practicing will really make a difference. And then little blocks, so small blocks or diddly blocks. Now, I get asked quite a lot about these, that people struggle printing very small blocks. And normally it's because you're applying too much pressure. So it's really worth kind of paying attention to this bit so that you can get the best prints possible. So when you're printing something like a diddly block, like a star or something, these don't need any pressure. So all I do with these is I just put it down and I just move it with my fingers. I'm not even pushing it into the mat or anything. I'm just side to side and then up. And again, the same with a really mini star. You just put it down, little rock, and up. And then you're going to get the definition and the sharp edges of the stars. But if you press too hard with the star, which I'm guessing some people have struggled with, is you lose all the definition. And can you see there, it's kind of come out as a little bit of a blob. You can't really see it's a star anymore. And that's because I've applied too much pressure for that. So with something like a little block, a little diddly block or a small block, you're just applying the lightest amount of pressure, and you're more just giving it a wiggle just to make sure all the edges touch the fabric or your paper. Again, the same thing happens with the mini blocks. When you apply too much pressure, you just lose all that definition and you just get the smudgy edges. So you can see there, just from those few prints, that the pressure you apply is really important. You don't want to be pushing too hard that it's smudgy and you lose the definition, and you don't want to be pushing too light that not much colour is coming out. So just work on practicing with your different designs and applying the right amount of pressure. Something like this large botanical cow parsley, now this has got quite a large solid top but a very thin stalk. So when I print a design like this, what I would tend to do, or when you're printing a design that has a stalk or a stem or has, you know, a part that's thicker than the other, is just pay attention to it. So with this block, I'm going to push harder at the top, so give the top of the block a good wiggle, but I'm just going to push the stem very lightly in order not to smudge it, because that's so thin, applying too much pressure will cause the stem to smudge. So more pressure at the top, just a little push at the bottom, and then up. And there you have a really beautiful print, and you've got the real detail on that thin stalk. But I'll show you what happens if you apply too much pressure with a design like that. So let's look at what happens when we push it too hard. And now this is a very popular block, so if you've got it at home, this will be a very good tip for you. So if I apply too much pressure to the stalk, if you can see here, it just loses the kind of nice thinness to it and it becomes a bit smudgy. So let's compare it to the other one I just printed. So can you see there how thin and detailed this stalk is? But when you push too hard, it just becomes smudgy and it just loses the sharpness. So it's really important to watch out when you've got a printing block that kind of varies in kind of detail. Now, another question we get asked a lot is there any difference between printing a really detailed printing block and a more simple printing block? So when people first start out, they tend to think that more simple blocks will print easier, but that's not the case. They both print the same, but there is a little bit of difference between a kind of more solid design and a detailed design, and I'm going to show you that now. So when you're printing with a very detailed design, like I said, you still apply the paint in exactly the same way. You're just lightly tapping all over the surface, making sure I'm getting paint all on the top. And then I'm going to turn this upside down and print it. And there we go. I've got a really beautiful, a very clear colour. You can see all the detail in that mandala. This was our Indian sunflower I just printed. And the colours come out really beautifully. Now I'm going to print my large, funky, solid flower in the same colour. And I just want to show you the difference, because I get asked this a lot on workshops and people think they're printing wrong or making a mistake. But when you print a very large, solid block, so a block that has a lot of solid colour, like this flower, when you print, you get this kind of cloudy effect. So this comes out in the print as kind of white speckles. So can you see there? On the flower, it's kind of a bit cloudy, whereas on our very detailed mandala, you don't see this, you don't notice the cloudiness. Now, lots of people say to me, oh, Tess, what am I doing wrong? You know, how can I fix this? Now, you're not doing anything wrong. This is just the block printing effect. When you print with a block that's very solid colour, you do get this kind of cloudiness in the print. So what I always say to people is, if you don't like this, you don't like this effect, just stick to more detailed designs. But some people don't mind it, so then you can vary between having very solid designs and very detailed designs. So I'll show you this again with the large star. So I'm going to print this in turquoise. Turn it upside down, give it a wiggle. And there we go again. You can see this kind of cloudiness in the print. And that is just the block printing effect, because it's never going to come out real solid colour. But with a more detailed design, you don't notice this. So I'm going to print our detailed bee in duck egg and show you how this looks. There we go. You really can't notice the cloudiness on a very detailed design because it's got very thin lines and lots of detail. But there you can see the difference between printing a more simple solid block and a very detailed block. And then from that, you can work out which style design you prefer. So hopefully that's given you some kind of new ideas to think about with your block printing. And next time you get your printing blocks out, either watch this video again or just have a think about whether you're applying the correct amount of pressure and whether your prints are coming out exactly how you'd like them to. If they're not, make sure you kind of go back to basics a little bit and just have a practice with them again and just try applying different pressure. Now, the most important thing to remember is that each printing block prints differently. So you must always practice with your printing block before moving on to kind of a fabric or paper item so that you know exactly how much pressure to apply. And also, I hope it's helped with thinking about more detailed designs and solid designs, and whether you've noticed that kind of cloudiness in your more solid designs before, and whether it's something you like or whether you'd rather stick to more detailed designs. So thank you very much for watching. Please write any comments or questions you have in the box below and we'll get back to you. Bye.